Well, he's an enigma through Mary's eyes. There's a bit of an archetype of this figure in a castle who's menacing. Whether it's Beauty and the Beast or Jane Eyre. So we don't meet him for a while. And when we do, it's an intimidating experience for her. And through Mary's eyes, I think there's something rather monstrous about him. And she's right, I think there is. He's a man in grief. It's about the death of his wife, and I think he's allowed his grief to become a horrible sort of negative force, not only in destroying himself, but in destroying anybody who's close to him. His environment, not just the garden, but the house and his son. And I think the people who are working around him as well, I think are all damaged, because I think that kind of self-consuming grief is terribly narcissistic. The oppositions are set up between just how dark and heavy the whole thing is against how hopeful and optimistic and colourful it's all going to be. And that's all sitting there like a seed in all the characters. And I think it's, in terms of the short span of time in which we've got to tell the story in a feature film, it's where is that revealed? Where is it hinted at? How much are we allowed to see the little sparks of hope as we go? How early on do we hope? And because I think the optimism of this story is explosive, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's so enduring. I got quite fired up just looking at design concepts for this. I didn't expect the castle to be quite so creepy. I didn't expect the images of the garden that I've seen to be quite so magical and sumptuous. And so I got quite excited about seeing that. It's going to go from that to that. But also the creepy stuff is beautiful. It's an idea that this was once beautiful in the past. This isn't the Addams Family. It's not it's not just a ghastly, cobwebby, sort of tomb-like place. It's become that, but you can see that there was once a lot of joy, and that we're seeing this kind of dusty, faded version of what was once a joyful life. That's something that's been lost. You ask anybody, it's never anything but a joy to work with Julie, and this isn't the first time for me. What have we done? 2 Mamma Mias, Mary Poppins. We haven't actually had the experience of working together before. We've often been in separate scenes in the same film, so this is the first time we've actually been joined at the hip for a number of scenes, and it has been an absolute delight to really get to know somebody better who I've actually known a little bit for more than a decade. I find Dixie, Amir and Eden astonishing. From rehearsals onwards, it's actually quite chastening. You come in there thinking you're the elder statesman and the old pro, and realizing you've got a thing or two to learn. Technically, they're extraordinary. They are indefatigable. They're always word perfect. And, I'm the one who's getting confused and never, wondering, missing my mark and all that sort of thing. So they put us all to shame, and they're an absolute delight to have around.
I read it when I was about 12, and I completely loved it. I don't know any little girl or boy, actually, that wouldn't love it, really. Just had everything. It was sort of mysterious and creepy and exciting and unusual. But with it was uplifting ultimately. So it was a lovely read. I loved the script, obviously. I'm too old now to just do things for my career. So I did it because I loved the script and I felt it was true to my memory of the book. Mrs. Medlock is the housekeeper at Misselthwaite Manor. And she's the first person from Misselthwaite Manor that Mary, our lead character, meets. She's my age, obviously, so she's 68, and so she's Victorian, really, in many ways, and is completely and utterly bewildered by Mary and the way she speaks and the way she sees things. She says, you're an odd duck, things like that. She can't make her out at all. She's constantly, throughout the film and throughout the script, she's wrong-footed by her. She is very, very faithful, possibly a little bit in love with Archibald, in a distant kind of way. Very, very protective of him. And the house, the running of the house is a huge burden, which she takes on completely, because, it's a huge house and very run down since the war. And she's really in charge of trying to get it up and running and back the way it was. And she's also more importantly, dealing with Archibald and his depression and his state of mind. So, she's got a lot to do. So you can see why she's harried. But we've never had a scene together, I don't think. So this is the first time we've actually acted together, although we did Mary Poppins and Mamma Mia. We sort of in scenes in Mamma Mia, but not really. We don't sort of act opposite one another. So that's been lovely. Lots of gossiping, lots of chatting. It's been great to work with him. He's fantastic to work with because he's so good. Dixie is extraordinary. She's incredibly bright, apart from anything else, but she is a really good actress. It'll be interesting to see whether she chooses acting later or what she'll choose, because she's clearly adept at most things, it seems to me, and it's not like working with a child in a lot of ways. You can have proper chats. We've been discussing Donald Trump and all sorts, and she's really lovely. We're very lucky that we found somebody so great. I was thrilled when I heard that Marc Munden was directing this and that they were interested in me, because I've worked with him before and it was an amazing experience. He is a wonderful director. So to see him directing a film is just fantastic. For me, what came out in this adaptation and of The Secret Garden and this filming of it is that it was about neglected people, and I found that very moving. People who are isolated and neglected and possibly depressed, and how through one another they find light.
My mum got the book for me when I was very small, because it was her favourite book when she was a kid. And obviously, because I was small, when I first read it, I didn't really understand it very well. But I read it again when I was about 8, and then I loved it. I really loved the story. Mary's a very determined character, and she won't take no for an answer for many things. Quite stubborn, but yeah, I like that because it's quite strong, and that's a good thing. Mark's brilliant because he's a lovely, kind person. He's funny, but he has a vision. He has such a vision for the film, and so he'll always do rehearsals, and he'll show us what to do. But he listens to our ideas. He listens to everyone's ideas. Both of them are really, really inspiring because obviously they're so experienced, but they're also really lovely people, and Julie's so funny, and Colin is he's so lovely, and they're both really inspiring and brilliant to watch, and they were so much fun to work with. The gardens are so beautiful. They're going to look more beautiful in the film, but honestly, I actually, for some of them, I'd never really seen anything like it. It was weird. Yeah, it was a thing, the dance everyone was doing at school, and obviously, since I just come out of school, it was sort of, and all the kids knew about it, and we thought it would be fun to try and teach some of the adults. So Colin and Julie, they did their best, but you know, I think it's safe to say, yeah, they needed a bit more work. But apart from that, everyone else could sort of do it, sort of. Even Marc had a go. I hope that when people see the film, it might remind them that actually, you know, nature's really beautiful, because myself included, we all spend a lot of time on our phones and stuff, and on, you know, Xbox and all that. But if you remember to go outside and see that nature is actually very beautiful and healing, as it is in the story. So, yeah, I hope they remember to look up from their phones, I guess, yeah.
Dickon's quite a bubbly character. He always looks at like the bright side of things. He doesn't really like moan or anything. He always just like gets along with things, like not like the other characters where like Colin's always moaning and Mary always wants knows what she wants and why she wants it and how. He's never really upset about anything. Like, you never really see Dickon like upset apart from one part in the movie, but he's always really happy and bubbly. Yeah, and he always looks on the bright side of things. He's always like there for the others when they're in need, and he doesn't really want to like get on the bad side of anyone. He just goes along with everything. Marc's really nice. He's good because like he knows what he wants and how he wants it. So he's not afraid to like take another take, or he likes to take his time and get it right, which is really good. And he always gives you like tips and stuff and how to play this better or say that line like that, and it's really helpful. I get along with Dixie really well. I'm really close friends with her. She's really sweet, so we just get along. We're into the same things, we're into the same games, so yeah, we built a friendship quite early on into the rehearsal process, yeah. I didn't realise like how good he was, because I hadn't really met a proper trained dog yet, and I met him and like 5 minutes into meeting him, I was already telling him to like sit, roll over, jump. He's really well trained here, it was good. You know, the inspiration to like go outside and admire the wildlife, because, you know, nowadays most people are just sitting inside on their phones or laptops, me myself even. So hopefully they get inspired by it to like go out and admire the nature.
I play a character called Martha, and Mary first meets her when she comes to England, and she goes to the house in Yorkshire, and I come into her room and she thinks that I'm her personal servant. I am a maid. However, Mary's used to personal servants in India, so she assumes that I'm going to be the same. The relationship between her and Mary is really sweet, and Mary, although she's like this hard child, like when she comes in, she's actually really vulnerable, and I think Martha tries to sort of teach her about the world and that she can't behave like that to people, and I think that their relationship's really sweet and beautiful, and it's really subtle, but you can see that Martha gets through to Mary throughout. I think Martha's a great character. We rehearsed properly with this for like a month off and on. So that was great. So then as soon as we got on set, we know what he wants, and he just lets you play with it. You can question what he thinks, he questions what you think, and then you work together. But he also has a clear idea of what he wants, but he's just open, and he's just a really nice guy, but really nice to work with. When I first met Dixie, I was really impressed by her. I think she's amazing. I think she's definitely going to be one of the stars of the future. They're both children that are just awful. To start off with, it's not their fault. They're just, you know, they're not nice children, but it's because of how they've been brought up, you know. So I think to see them go from horrible to loving and kind and build that bond together, and even for Mr. Craven to realise how he's brought his son up through love but the wrong way, overprotecting him and keeping him locked away, and then to see him realise what he's done in the end is really nice. I think, yeah, it's that's why people like the story, because it's, although it's deep and dark, it has a beautiful ending. They've wanted to keep all the elements and the feel of the old story, but then just give it a modern twist, and I think they've done it really well. They're two British iconic actors. It was, you know, when I found out who I was playing against, I couldn't believe it. It's amazing. And also, the first day I came to set, they were already shooting a scene, and I was just standing by. And even before that, in rehearsals, when I first met Julie, who's absolutely lovely, they're both lovely, and I was just watching as they rehearsed, and it was like a masterclass in acting, and I just couldn't take my eyes off them. And then it's like, right, okay, get into character, focus on yourself, don't show yourself up, you know. To work with them has been amazing.
My sister saw that I was reading the book, so we both kind of read the book together, and we were both like really into it, so we were on the same level, so we were talking about it, you know, and it was a really, really lovely book, and I really enjoyed it. He kept it so that the actors would play the character how they saw them, so that Marc wasn't pushing a character on someone. So he did like point out tips and stuff to help us, but he really, really liked that we played our characters how we saw them. Colin came across as like this really, really mean person, but really he had a few issues, you know, in his life. Being locked up in a bedroom forever is quite a bad thing, so he had this kind of fear and hatred all tangled up, but really he was really nice, and he has a heart of gold, so I really liked to portray that in the film. He was locked up in his bedroom for 10 years, like I said, and he was like in this bleak, really horrible room that made you feel sick yourself. So going from that to these vivid, kind of crazy gardens, like I don't think a lot of people have experienced the sudden change in environment, and you can't really YouTube these things. So I kind of thought about it and put myself like in his shoes, and I really liked to think that this is like the first time he's ever seen a garden in real life, so that helped me out. I like that he's like a very, very small, kind of weak, feeble guy, and he thinks he's so much stronger and better than everyone else, so I really liked how he's got this ego that's way above his tiny head.
Working with Judy, Colin, it was really cool. I've never met anyone this big before, so I was really nervous when I first met them, but they're really lovely people. I mean, Julie's hilarious and Colin's awesome, he's really nice. So working with them, it was just amazing, you know, it was an experience like no other. FOZZIE was amazing. So I had to do a scene with him where he comes up and for the first time and I see FOZZIE, and he's lovely. He's the calmest dog you'll ever meet. He's very professional. I think more professional than some actors on set. I think the audience should see that when you first meet someone, they might seem horrible or rude, but people are really nice once you get to know them, and all you need is a little bit of magic from a garden.
The first thing that hit me was Jack's script. I loved it. I mean, it felt like a very modern retelling of something which was a classic piece of literature, you know, a glorious piece of classic literature, everyone's favourite book. And what he'd done is he writes children brilliantly, Jack, and he'd just written these children as sort of imperious children jousting with each other, and it was very funny, very real, and had enormous amount of heart in it. Well, it's a very gothic book in lots of ways, or at least the adaptations have been quite gothic of the novel, and it starts off almost like a ghost story, and I really relish the idea of taking this little girl into this uncanny, strange, vast house where she's lost in it. So that was the first thing. And then there was the garden, of course, which I thought we had an opportunity to make something much more fantastical and immersive than any garden that you'd seen in adaptations before. Pan's Labyrinth was a reference in that, and I love that film. Obviously, this is a very sort of redemptive story about children finding love, so it's a very different piece. But just in terms of sort of the way that garden interacts with the child, I think that's a good reference. What is really apparent in the book is it's psychologically really, really rich and contemporary, and it feels like the audience are ready for a sort of a really complex, dense psychological version of The Secret Garden. And I think, you know, the thing is that it's just that, you know, the garden is full of wonder. It's a beautifully redemptive story, and I think it's about seeing these children blossom in the same way as the garden blossoms as they clear away the weeds and leave the plants to do their thing. She's fiercely proud of the house, and she's fiercely loyal to Archibald, and what I love in Julie, having worked with her before, is her ability to bring to life the inner life, the hidden life of characters, and just make them psychologically rich. Colin Firth, I mean, he's a legend. I mean, I've seen so much of his work, and he just gets more and more interesting as he goes on. And I just jumped at the opportunity of working with him. I just wanted someone who, even though they were grieving, you could see the life within that is then released at the end when he's united with his son. And I don't think there'll be a dry eye in the house at that point. I mean, it's really, really moving. But someone like Colin, I just wanted to see all that passion and life within his eyes, yet He's unable to express it through grief. He's shut down by grief. And I just think he's the perfect person to bring that out. In a way, it's about Mary learning to become a child within the garden, this film. So she starts with this sort of quite traumatic beginning with her parents dying and her abandoned on her own in India, and her defences go up, and as she finds these friends in the house, and as she finds the garden and the dog and Dickon and Colin, she learns how to become a child again, and she learns how to make friends as a child would make friends. So it was about finding a Mary that could understand that and actually be quite childlike, as well as being quite sophisticated in that imperiousness. Well, I think it's a totally international story, because it's about a child having been abandoned in this big house, finding wonder in the garden. So in that sense, it feels very international. I don't think it. I think it's set in England, but it's about her finding the glory of this garden, so the mystery, first of all, of the house, and the mystery of the garden, the strangeness of it, and then it blossoming into something sort of wondrous and healing, and that feels quite universal to me.
The Secret Garden is a universal story. It's been published all over the world, and I think is as relatable today as when it was first published in 1911. There is so much in this story, and I think in particular in the way that Marc Munden is telling the story, that will appeal around the world. I mean, it's set in the UK. It's set largely in the countryside in the UK, but its themes, its ideas resonate globally. I mean, it's about wonder and friendship and family and grief and the power of friendship and bonds to overcome boundaries and to overcome issues and to overcome grief, things that hold you back. Archibald, who is played by Colin Firth, who brings such heart and warmth to his character. He's a character who's quite shut down through a large part of the story. He is grieving. His wife has died, and it's put him in a shell, and also his son into a shell of sorts. And what is so beautiful is that in spite of this, and in spite of the darkness and trauma that he's going through, Colin Firth brings an authenticity and an intelligence and an empathy and a sympathy. The audience will empathize with him and feel for him so strongly. Julie is just a joyous spirit. There's no airs or graces about Julie. She's here to work, and she's here to have fun, and she's just the most wonderful spirit to have around. She's also a brilliant actress, and like Colin Firth, brings, you'll immediately care for her and feel for her. She has an incredible range. I mean, you look at the breadth of her work and it's astonishing. So she can play the fierce, but it's not a fierce without humanity. I mean, she's not just a cold, evil woman. She's someone who can bring so many shades to that character. Her relationship with Archibald, she brings a depth that makes the choices she makes and the way she behaves so understandable, if not always appealing. It will not put off anybody who knows and is familiar with the book. In fact, I think they will love it. But at the same time, I think there are opportunities to bring new audiences to it, people who aren't as familiar with the book, and allow them to look at it and feel that it speaks to them and speaks to now. In Marc's hands, Marc Munden, who's such a brilliant director, I think that this telling, and this story's been told a couple of times before on film, but this particular telling will be the most immersive telling that we've seen. Marc is a brilliant director, always seeking truth in performance, very energetic in his portrayals, in everything that he does. There's real dynamism, and I think that this telling will be, this adaptation will be very faithful, very immersive, very accessible.
Our absolutely first thought for writer was Jack Thorne, because we felt that Jack has a wonderful, very contemporary understanding of children, and he's very drawn to slightly misfit children and children who are slightly odd ducks, and this is a story with these unloved children who learn how to discover friendship and heal each other. And we felt that Jack could bring a sort of psychological modernity to that. But he also writes with this lovely, vivid, spontaneous naturalism, so that you could believe in how these children were talking to each other. We also took it out of its Edwardian setting with bonnets and put it just after the Second World War. So the past is still another country, but we wanted to have that sort of slightly remote sense that everything is happening in the shadow of a big cataclysm that has happened, and the house has been requisitioned as a hospital in the war, and when Mary arrives there, it's still full of sort of relics of this war that's just happened, and it's a time of aftermath. We really wanted to find a director who was visionary and was a world creator. And we've pursued Marc Munden over the years because I always so admire his television. It's always so distinctive and authored and with this extraordinary sort of concentrated visual flair. But also he always plumbs the depths of emotion with his characters. So it was this combination of the emotional truth and rigour of his work, but also the visionary, this very authored envisioned worlds that he always comes up with. The great thing about The Secret Garden is it really does have at its heart this extraordinarily vivid story. And it's not just about a pretty garden and about a girl gambolling amongst the flowers. It is also about this dark and brooding Gothic house full of secrets. And it's full of peril, and she's this intrepid child who has to creep through corridors and try and discover mysteries. And so you've got this wonderful mix of the dark, spooky house full of mysteries and secrets, and then the light world of this fantastical garden full of flowers and blossoming and lightness. Mary Lennox begins this very closed, broken, damaged child, and she could either choose the dark or the light, and she takes the path to the garden and brings the people, the broken people from Misselthwaite into the garden and heals them. She heals Colin, she reunites him with his father. So it's a great mythic story of a child on a fearful odyssey, but choosing the path of light over darkness. We couldn't be more fortunate than with Julie Walters and Colin Firth for this film. They are both so perfect for their roles. Interestingly, while we were doing auditions for Mary, I was doing some of the reading of Archibald's lines, and this was before Colin Firth had agreed to do it. And as I was reading the lines, all I could hear was his voice. There was this sort of brooding, melancholic edge that I knew that he could capture so perfectly for Archibald. And so we were so thrilled when he responded and could see himself playing that role. Julie Walters has such range and versatility, and I know she's going to, and we want Mrs. Medlock to be a really interesting, not just a sort of hard-nosed villain, but somebody who you feel really carries the burden of this house, and she's trying to keep it together, and she's frustrated and irritated by this child, but you want to sense a hinterland of something bigger, and Julie has such a nimble ability to switch between fierce and complex, and I know that she's going to provide an extraordinarily riveting Mrs. Medlock. Children always enjoy this story. I think actually children always seem to be particularly drawn to the spooky, ghostly House of Secrets. But adults often get very sentimental and attached to the idea of the lost garden. And so I think there's a wonderful double appeal with this film, that adults have a sort of deep nostalgia with this lost idyll of childhood and of this lost garden world. And children get very drawn on the riveting adventure. So Mary Lennox arrives in this sad old house on the Yorkshire moors, and she's abandoned and alone and friendless and a little joyless, and then she wanders outside, and the first beginnings of her connection with the world about her happen when she comes upon a stray abandoned dog. And in our sense of this dog is that this dog possibly has lost its master in the war. His master went away and never came back, and so a bit like her, he's a lost old soul. And the first sense of Mary having a rapprochement and a relationship with somebody is as she begins to feed her spam sandwiches to this dog. And gradually from there, she begins to learn how to open her heart to the other children that she meets as she begins to blossom as a person. It's an opportunity to really explore a world of enchantment and imagination, wonder and joy. And it's all at the service of this wonderfully redemptive story about unloved children who find each other and heal each other and go from darkness to light.